Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad you could be here. Our topic today is natural temperaments, and it's an important topic to discuss because it's an important social emotional health is important for infants and toddlers, and natural temperaments is a big part of that. Social emotional health, we know, impacts all areas of growth and development for young children. And it's the foundation upon which all future development is built. So let's first find out what exactly is temperament. This is the definition, the formal definition of temperament. And basically, it's just a person's typical nature, just their normal behavior, the way that they simply are. So think about yourself. Maybe you've been described as having an artistic temperament with a flair for decorating or for drawing. Maybe you have a friend that you would describe as being the most positive person that you know. That person that could always find the silver lining in any situation. Aspects of temperament are noticeable from birth, and it's our individual way of approaching the world. So again, temperament is defined by how a person usually acts. It's made up of several different traits rather than just one or two. And it's really important, I think, too, to understand that no type of temperament is good or bad. It just is what you are, and we should relate to people differently based on what their temperament is. And it's also important to note that temperament has nothing to do with temper. Temper is more how easily you would react to something or how strongly you would react to something happening. That's what temper is. So what we know is that these temperament characteristics generally stay consistent over time. Your temperament as an adult is likely consistent with the temperament that you had when you were a child. And even though they sound similar, I want to again remind you that temperament does not have anything to do with a person's temper. A child's natural temperament is going to affect her reaction or her interactions with people around her, or the situation that she's in, or her environment of the moment. What does that mean? Well, a good example might be a child who's sensitive to noise and may sleep better when her cot is placed away from the CD player at nap time. You might know a child who needs to stay by your side when an unfamiliar person enters the play space. Some of you right now might be bouncing your foot up and down because it helps you stay more focused while I talk. All of these are examples of how temperament affects a person's reaction to different situations, different people, and different environments.
Let's stop for just 1 second. I have one person indicating that she's not able to hear anything. Are other people, if you could type either yes, I guess if you can hear me, if you could type yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you, thank you. I just want to make sure that our audio is actually working. Perfect. A lot of you let us know that you can hear us. Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right, good, because I didn't want to have to start all over again. All right, so here's a question. Do you embrace change with enthusiasm, or are you slow to accept changes? Do you eagerly try new foods, or do you tend to stick to the foods that you're used to and that you know you like? Are you a quiet person in a group setting, or are you the life of the party? Would you rather read a book or take a hike? These are just some ways that people approach the world and other people around them. Did anyone have any comments about what things they would rather do? Hike or read? How many lives of the party do we have listening today?
Some like reading better than hiking.
Oh, someone says, not me. They're not the life of the party. Sure you are.
We have some who like hiking.
Uh-huh. So you see, we just right here with the group that we have people with all different temperaments. What one of us likes, another one might not find enjoyable, or we might even find it uncomfortable to do something that somebody else likes.
So we have some who say that they are the life of the party, some who are indicating they're definitely the quiet ones, some like both hiking and reading. So yeah.
You can read on a hike. That's right. You see? So it's fun. It's fun to sort of find out what other people, what their comfort levels are in different situations. And this just goes to show that we're all unique and we're all different, and all of us are good with our temperaments. So now you're starting to think about temperament in yourself, as well as when we talk a little more, we'll see about how that relates to temperaments of the children that we work with. So when you learn to identify your own temperament traits and the traits of the children in your care, you can better support their social emotional development. By understanding temperament, it allows you to anticipate situations that might be difficult or easy for a child. It helps you support each child's natural abilities and their needs, and it helps you individualize your care for each child. And by doing that, you're going to enhance the relationships that you have with each child. Being able to do these things is an important factor in supporting social emotional development in infants and toddlers. There are 3 basic temperament styles that we tend to group temperaments in. This doesn't mean that everybody fits very easily into these 3, but most often you can find a category that fits you or a child by looking at these. The first one is easygoing, the second one is slow to warm, and the third one is active. Again, remember that none of these styles are better than another. It's just that each one of these is unique to the people that you know and the children that you work with. Temperaments are innate, and you are born with a general temperament style, and each temperament style has its unique characteristics. For example, you might have had an infant in your care long ago that was just so easy to take care of. That baby was happy and patient and never fussy. Now that infant is a young adult with a great sense of humor, very outgoing, very adaptable to things in any situation. Does this sound familiar to any of you? Feel free to write something in the comment box.
Yeah, we have some people who are identifying that they know that kind of a situation, or they've had a child that they can think of.
Right. It's fun. I know a lot of times when I go out and visit programs that providers will tell me that, that these children that they cared for when they were very, very young come back as they're graduating from high school and going into college, and it's really touching that these adults, young adults, realize how important you all were in their early years. So I think that's a huge compliment. Okay? All right, so here's your general temperament styles. An easygoing child is generally happy, active from birth, adjusts very easily to new situations, new people, new places. They're the ones that just kind of go with the flow. I think sometimes, these are the children that we like to see come into our programs, but they can also be the ones that don't always get their needs met because they just don't fuss about it when they don't get what they don't need. They just kind of go, oh, well, that's That's just the way it is. Maybe I'll, get what I need later. So all of these children, it's important to spend time individualizing your care for all of these children. So that's easygoing. And I think most children fall into that category. Our next one, slow to warm, is a generally observant child. They're usually very calm. They just need that extra time to adjust to new situations, and especially new people, new environments. They really need somebody that they trust to be with them. And there's strategies and ways that we can help these children acclimate to a new situation. We'll talk about those in a little bit. And then the last one, which is my personal favorite, is the active child. This is the child that approaches life with enthusiasm. They have varied routines. They're not always real predictable. They might be hungry at different times. One day they might eat a lot. Another day they might eat hardly anything. And their sleep routines sometimes are sort of unpredictable. And that makes it a little bit hard to individualize their care because you're not sure what they're going to need from day to day. But they tend to be the most fun children because they really keep you on your toes. And, you have to be on point to keep up with them and stay one step ahead, hopefully.
We have a comment from a participant who indicates that she has twins, and one is easygoing and one is slow to warm. That's awesome that you can recognize the different temperament styles in the two children.
And it's a good example of how you're just born with your temperament, that even though they're twins, their temperaments are not exactly the same.
Right.
I can remember experience with twins that I've had in the past where maybe one was easygoing, one was slow to warm, and you'd get comfortable with that as a caregiver, and you'd be like, okay, I got it, I have everything all figured out. Then all of a sudden they'd switch, and one would be more the leader than the other, and you're like, whoa, I thought I had this figured out. So, just a warning, just in case.
Right. What you mentioned before about your personal favorite, we'll talk about later when we talk about what's called goodness to fit. So. My personality and the way that I view the general temperament style of another person is going to be something that I need to look at because there is not so much a cause and effect, but there's a different approach that I might have to a child based on my own personal temperament style.
Exactly. I guess I think it's a good fit. An active child is a good fit for me. Thank goodness, because my children were active. But I find that activity level challenging and fun. So for me, it's a good fit, whereas somebody else might not see it quite the same way. So yeah, that's cool. Very true. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the traits that go into determining which style a child might fall into. So there's 9 common temperament traits, and we're going to go through each one of these individually. When we're looking at these traits too, remember that sort of see them on a spectrum. So if we're talking about a child's activity level, we would be sort of gauging, are they a low activity child, are they a medium activity child, or are they a high activity child? So for each of these items that we go through, think about that, and maybe even just take mental note in your head, thinking where you might fall in each of these 9 temperament traits. So let's go through each one, and we'll start with activity level. So activity level refers to the general level of motor activity when one is awake or asleep. Motor activity involves large and small muscle movement like running, jumping, rolling over, holding a crayon, picking up toys. Look at the little boy in this picture. What would your guess be? Where do you think he would fall for activity level? And why?
We have a comment that someone believes he would be active, like he's exploring.
Mm-hmm.
He's curious. He knows how to get around even though he might not be walking yet.
Right.
Active, happy, and playful.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, we can only guess so much by looking at a picture, but obviously we see him, he worked his way over towards that tree. You know, we might guess that he had to crawl, so that was using a lot of his motor skills to crawl over to this tree. I think somebody had used the word curious, and absolutely, he wanted to get over to that tree. He wants to touch that bark and figure out what it is. So I would guess probably that this child is anywhere from medium to high activity level. It might depend on how long he stays at that tree. Maybe he'll only get there just long enough to touch it once and then he's off to another tree or another plant. So that would be a good guess. Any other comments you wanted to share, or did we all sort of feel the same way?
Yeah, I think everybody's added a comment that's interested in doing that, and it just seems like most people think that he's curious and happy. But I like your comment that we can only observe what's in this one still shot, this moment in time, and whether or not he stays there to explore it longer, or like you said, he might touch it and then he moves on to something next, could be something we would be observing in order to understand where he falls on the activity level range.
Right. He's a cutie, though.
He is.
All right, so our next trait is distractibility. And distractibility is the ease with which a person can be distracted, or conversely, the level of concentration or focus. So where do you think, if you look at the picture of this little girl, where do you think she would fall on the spectrum of distractibility? Do you think she would be highly distractible from this activity, or do you think she would have low distractibility, which means she has really high focus?
Yeah, the comments indicate she's focused, that she would have low distractibility. She looks very focused on what she's doing. We can't see her face because she's looking at the sand and what's happening when she pours that shovel, turns that shovel, what happens to the sand. So it looks like people are saying she's very focused with low distractibility.
That was exactly my thought, too, that she looks like, I could walk right past her where she's digging and she wouldn't even look up to see if I was there or what I was doing there. She looks like she's very focused on watching the sand fall as she pours it. Maybe she's trying to build a tall mound of sand. She looks like she's having a really good time. So I agree that she would be a low distractibility. All right, here's intensity. And intensity refers to the energy level of a person's emotional response, whether that be positive or negative. For example, maybe, I'm at the grocery store and I see a friend at the other end of the aisle that I haven't seen in a couple of years, and we see each other. Now, if I had a high intensity level, I would scream out her name, run down the aisle, and give her a big hug and tell her how much I missed her. If I'm a low intensity emotional response, I might just wave and smile at her and wait for her to walk up to me. So that would be the difference in intensity. What do you think about this baby here? There's the little girl blowing bubbles for the baby. And again, I know you can't see the baby's face, but I think you can get a good idea of what level of intensity that baby is reacting at.
Baby looks very happy. Maybe one person says very high, very excited in terms of response. Someone else says medium intensity. Again, we're just making guesses based on this photo and what we might have experience with a child in a situation like this that might be similar. Someone said it looks like the baby's trying to pop the bubbles, so that could be high intensity, high response, very excited, very happy.
Right. Yeah, it looks like that little guy. I think it's a little guy because he's got a blue hat.
Yeah, he has a blue hat. And the little
Doesn't mean a girl can't wear a blue hat, but
right. And the little girl is smiling, and
right.
It seems like she's enjoying his response.
Yeah, they look like they're having a good time. He's clapping his hands and popping the bubbles. So, right. So anywhere from medium to high for that intensity, we would guess. All right, the next one is regularity, and I did mention that a little bit when we talked about the styles, the temperament styles. So regularity is the predictability of biological functions, and that would include eating, sleeping, and other bodily functions. So the children that are very easy to predict, it makes it easier for you to meet their needs before they work themselves into upset or anything, because you just know that right before outdoor time is when they usually need their diaper changed, and so that just helps you to meet their needs quickly and efficiently. That irregular child, you just have to really know the signs. You really have to know. And sometimes they have a hard time falling asleep, the children that have, that are not very regular. It's hard for them to calm down because their body is active and busy. So you need to think of strategies for those children to help them learn to relax.
Well, I think one thing to remember about this is that regularity does not mean that the child is following the schedule that you think the child
Correct.
should be following.
Correct.
So regularity or the predictability doesn't mean that just because you say nap time is 1 o'clock, that is the time that this child should regularly be falling asleep. So we have to look at our expectations versus what is the child actually telling us.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, you look at this little guy here, and it looks like he looks so comfortable. He looks like he could sleep forever. My guess would be he sleeps at the same time every day. He probably, drinks a nice bottle and then dozes off and goes right to bed without any assistance at all. So there's not a lot of work on our end trying to figure it out. But helping those children that are irregular, helping them learn to recognize when their body is hungry and when their body is sleepy, and then helping them with those the ability to calm themselves and self-soothe so that they can start to relax and fall asleep. They may just be so busy. I would say my son was like this. He would be so busy playing and running that he would forget to eat. And so we really had to sort of go through a time where, where he had a warning almost, like it's, you've got 5 more minutes and then I need you to eat something or drink something, because he would just be on the go all the time. So this is an important one, and I think this is one you can certainly think of children you have that are either regular, like clockwork, or not. So let's see what's next. Oh, I love this picture. So sensitivity. This is also something I think that sometimes we miss when we're trying to help children in different situations, is their level of sensitivity. And that doesn't just mean their emotional sensitivity, like maybe they cry easily, or get embarrassed easily, or whatever it might be. But this is really how sensitive they are to the physical stimuli in the environment, like how bright is it in your classroom? How loud is it in your classroom? And what about different textures? I'm sure we all know that child that just can't stand the tag in the back of their shirt. And, to the point where you're, putting tape around it or doing something, anything but cutting it out, because the parents might not want you to do that. Or turning the shirt inside out. I think that's another solution that I've seen in the past. We'll think of anything to help that child, because they're just not going to move on with their day if that little tag keeps rubbing the back of their neck. Have you ever had that experience?
Where sometimes it's on their socks, the little seam on their socks,
Ooh,
if
yeah.
that's not lined up correctly, that can, a child who is high sensitive or has sensory sensitivities, that will become the focus of that child's moment until it's changed.
Right. And even though maybe to some of us that are not sensitive, it might seem silly to get that upset about a tag or your sock.
But for those of us who are sensitive,
right.
which is my situation,
yeah.
I do cut the tags out of almost everything that I purchase, and I just don't wear socks unless I absolutely have to.
Unless it's below freezing.
Unless it's below freezing. I let Helen go do the skiing for me. So
that's right. That's right. I tell her how it feels when it's cold outside because she doesn't want to experience it for herself. Yeah, this is one I would really hope that a lot of you, if you haven't already, sat down and thought about it. You know, if you have a child that just seems to have certain times of the day where they just seem fussy or you know, hard to comfort, think about, you know, really stop in the moment and write a note and just to yourself and think, okay, what is happening? Is it, you know, is it just way too bright in my room? Is it because I have music playing all day long? Sometimes, you know, the sound of silence is golden. And you know, not just for you, but also for those children, just to have quiet time when they can think and play without other noises distracting them. So think about that. When are you using the music, and do you need it? What about if you have a very large group of children and just the noise level of the children playing? That can be very overwhelming to a lot of sensitive children. Is there some way where half of the children could go outside and play while half of the children stayed inside, and then you could flip? Because that's automatically going to bring down the noise level. And you're going to find it's going to make you happier too.
And related to the textures, textures can be a big thing to many, many children. And you might see it, for example, with creative arts, where a child is not willing to touch Play-Doh or do finger paint. They might be okay if you put something in a Ziploc bag and have like a sensory bag, but to actually put their hands into something like that, the textures can be overly stimulating for them. And also looking at, like Helen said, what is the light that you have in your room? What are the, you know, if you're flipping lights on and off to get the children's attention and you have a child who's highly sensitive, that could be a real problem for that child. The same if you're ringing a bell, like if it's cleanup time and you ring this loud bell. A child with high sensitivity can react very strongly to that. It can actually really be very, very difficult for them to deal with. We have a comment that someone is caring for a child who is very sensitive to the tags in the shirts, and someone else mentioned that they now often will print that information directly on the fabric, which I love, which is
tagless shirts.
But I think many parents don't understand the fact that those tags, it's a physical pain. It is a physical discomfort. It's not just that the child is trying to be difficult. It is actually a physical discomfort. We have a whole course on sensory challenges that's taught by one of our instructors, Amber Gant, who is a specialist in this area. And if you have children who do react strongly to, you know, especially the things we've been talking about now, tags or socks, the seams in socks, or the lights, the sounds, I really encourage you to look in our Institute for Early Learning course offerings and enroll in the sensory challenges, because this is an area that many people do not understand, and for some children, even just brushing their hair is extremely painful. And it has nothing to do with autism. It can have something to do with autism, but it's not. It's a completely different sensitivity challenge, or it's part of personality, but it's way beyond that.
Right. It's because it is,
system.
yeah, actually a physical thing. And I was thinking too, you know, when we mentioned textures and we're talking about clothing and such, but that could also be your children that have certain food textures
Yes.
that they just, will make them gag or they just don't care for. And, of course we want them to eat well and we want them to eat healthy, but if something really is difficult for them to eat, something that's lumpy or whatever, and they just can't handle it, I think we need to be sympathetic to that, and instead of making them try it and hoping they'll get used to it, finding other strategies that would be more productive.
Right, being understanding of what that child might actually be experiencing versus
Right.
projecting what we think is going on.
Right. Well, I mean, I can tell you, if you tried to get me to eat a raw oyster, you would be really sorry after I put that in my mouth. But my family, the men in my family, they'll just suck them right down, and it makes me ill just to think about it.
The texture, yeah.
The texture is horrid.
Right.
So, it would just be mean to make me do that. But other people seem to find it pleasurable. So.
And in this photo, you can see many different things we're talking about. We can see lights, the natural light, the shadows. We don't know about sound, but there is a sound if those leaves move, and there's texture to those leaves. So, from this picture, this little gal seems to be comfortable.
Right, and those leaves are probably crunchy, and they're a little slippery, and she's dressed pretty warmly, so I'm going to guess that it's chilly out there. And I even see leaves falling on her head.
Oh, yeah.
So she probably has low sensitivity because she seems to be enjoying that activity. So any other questions about sensitivity? That is one that I feel is one that we often forget to discuss or to think about when we're looking at children.
Someone indicates that a child in her care has a difficult time with his hands being dirty. And for example, at lunch, he will not touch anything until his hands have been cleaned. So he has high sensitivity to whatever stimuli is on his hands.
Right. Okay. Good. All right. Now we are on to approachability. And approachability is a child's initial response to new places, situations, or things. So children that are highly approachable would come into your environment and begin to play immediately. On the other hand, a child who's less approachable would need time to stand back and observe for a little while before they joined in to the group. So that one's pretty clear-cut, pretty easy.
When we see that in ourselves pretty easily.
Right, right. Yeah, I don't know, it depends on the situation whether I will walk right in or whether I guess really I have to take a few minutes just to sort of get the lay of the land and figure out which direction I want to go in. All right, so next is adaptability, and that's how easily someone adjusts to change or transition. So approachability, just to make it clear so you don't get them confused, because they are similar. Approachability is your initial response to something new. And adaptability refers to how a person adjusts to changes over time. So I'm sure we've all had that experience with children that have to change classrooms as they get older. And there's sometimes children that just take weeks to adjust and feel comfortable. And that would probably be a good example of low adaptability. It's not that you didn't prepare them or give them time to sort of get to know the new teachers informally. It's just that it's hard for them to make that change, and they just need the time. So I'm sure that's similar to a lot of you. All right, here's another one of my favorite pictures. I don't know who these two little guys are, but I think they're so cute. Persistence. Persistence is the length of time that a person continues in an activity in the face of obstacles or challenges. So when you look at these two little ones here, what would you think about their persistence? What do you think they're doing? And how long do you think they've been at it?
So it appears that they are intrigued by something in this structure where the tires are. They look pretty happy exploring.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be focused, so they might have been there for a while. They look curious. It looks like they might be trying to either get something out of the tire or manipulate, move something that is in the tire. They're exploring. Seems like they might have been there for a while, like they really intrigued.
That's the impression I get. I don't know why, but I do feel like they that was sort of the bulk of their time on the playground that day. The two of them working on something together. I mean, you see there's the little pea gravel on the ground there. They could be, putting the pea gravel up high and watching it slide down, and maybe that's just so funny and interesting that they keep doing it over and over. So I'm going to go with these guys are highly persistent, or maybe they're trying to get something that's stuck in there and they can't quite reach it. So again, that would be persistence, that they don't just see it and go, oh, I can't get it, and they leave. These guys look determined, like they are going to work on it for a while.
And they're pretty young. They look like they're
Mm-hmm.
around a year old.
Right, yeah, and they look like best buddies.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen children that, maybe they're working on a puzzle and they try the puzzle piece once or twice and it doesn't fit, and then they just walk away and look for something else to do. So that would be low persistence, that they just, once an obstacle occurs, they're just not really interested in working their way through it. All right, and then this is mood. So mood is the tendency that you have to react to the world primarily in a positive or maybe in a more serious way. Just like in the beginning, we talked about that person that that just is always cheerful. Nothing seems to get that person down. Or conversely, you might know somebody who just always seems to be in a bad mood. And you tend to avoid those people, right? If you're not sure, or you think they're just always going to, be sort of the downers that oh, I know it's sunny today, but that wind is really blowing and my hair is so messed up and now I don't know what I'm going to do. It's just your general tendency, your general mood, and how you react. Any thoughts on that, or are we?
What do you think about this little guy? Does he look like he would be a more positive, cheerful mood type of person, or a more negative, serious mood type of person? He looks positive. Happy-go-lucky is sometimes an expression that's used. We have a lot of people saying he seems to be positive and cheerful.
Right, he's happy. Well, he's got that spunky little haircut, so I bet his parents are probably really positive people too. I bet they're fun.
That looks like it. Very cute.
He's got his little spunky haircut. All right, so in a few minutes, I'm going to take you to this website, but I just wanted to point this out to you. This is a place where you can go and learn a little bit more about temperament traits, and there's charts and other resources. It's called the Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation website, and I'm going to show you just a very small part of it, but I want you to see it and know that it's there. What I recommend to a lot of providers that I work with is that they also share this with their parents, because here you are in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon listening to a webinar. Parents don't go to these trainings. They don't learn about these resources. But often you have parents that come in and just say, I don't know what to do with him. This has been a really rough morning. So when we go on and do this, you'll see how this could really be helpful for a parent in learning how to better deal with their children in different situations. So we'll go there in just a minute, but before we do, I wanted to, Karen had mentioned Goodness of Fit, and you can find information about this on the website too. So we talked about children's temperaments, we talked about our temperaments, and that goodness of fit. It's a compatibility between the adult and the child's temperament. And us being the adults, we need to be the ones that find the strategies so that we can adapt to the child's temperament. What we don't want to do is sort of have that attitude that, well, I'm going to change his temperament. I want him to be more easygoing or more active. That's not our goal at all. Our goal is to let them be the unique individuals that they are, and then we find strategies that help us work well with the children so that they can be successful. And it's not that hard to do. When I worked with providers, when I was a director at a program, I can remember one time talking to my teachers, and I said, you need to have a different set of rules for every child in your classroom. And those teachers stared at me like I was crazy. They're like, but that's not fair. And I said, no, nobody else knows. Only you know what those rules are. It's not like we're posting, Billy's rules and Sally's rules or anything like that. It's simply that I understood that Billy can't sit in circle time for more than 5 minutes, or he starts rolling around and jumping on people. That's his limit. That's all he can do. He's an active child. So in order to help him be successful with the person that he is, I allow him to be the first person to get up and leave circle, knowing that right now that's all he can take. And then I let him go set the table, or I let him be the first one to go to the bathroom, whatever it is. He doesn't know that I'm doing that. The other children who are interested in your circle time, they don't mind that he leaves first because they want to stay. So you see how I'm just sort of individualizing and helping to have that good fit between myself and the children. So like we said, it doesn't mean that you have to have matching temperaments in order to get along. The caregiver should not have to change who they are, and the child should not have to change who they are. It's just finding that way to understand each other and base your expectations for that child accordingly. So hopefully that's clear, the goodness of fit. I mean, I guess honestly, there probably are very rare situations where goodness of fit just does not occur. It might be between you and a parent, not necessarily the child. But you try your strategies, and if they don't work, then I think it's just you have that that decision you have to make where you just have to give that child a change, because if you don't have goodness of fit, the child is not going to be in a healthy situation.
I'm going to comment here on a question that was just typed in. And this is a person who's working with a very active 4-year-old boy. And she's not sure how to get him to stay still in circle, or how to get the attention during circle time. And I have some thoughts, but I know you help with it, help people with this every day. So let me have you talk about some strategies that might work.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of different things, and actually, on the next slide, I was going to actually talk about that, about ways, if you have a very active child. I mean, you're being very specific to circle time. Active children need, new things, challenging things. They will easily get bored with the same thing over and over. They're curious, and they need to be given things that help foster that curiosity and get them thinking and focusing. That's how to help them. Now, if I saw the question correctly, he has a hard time sitting at circle time. I think it's determining how long can he sit in the circle time. What else could he be doing? How is it affecting your circle time with the rest of the children if you're asking him to stay? Sometimes what happens is I spend my whole circle time trying to keep this one person sitting, and it disrupts the circle time for everybody else. And then it's just not, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read the question. It's just not fun for anyone, and then nobody wants to come to circle time.
Yes, I think to start with the premise that circle time is not your most important component of the day, and circle time should be active. To think that a 4-year-old boy who has a more active temperament trait should have to sit still is an unrealistic expectation. Children learn by doing. This same example goes on to talk about doing workbooks. 4-year-olds don't live in a world of workbooks, and workbooks really aren't a learning experience that's helpful to them. Some children do enjoy that kind of focus, but typically this child needs to be very highly engaged in something. So when you start circle time, you're not waiting for everyone to sit still. You start circle time very, very active. You start it in a way that invites that child into his own world, into his world of activity. So to ask a 4-year-old to sit in circle time, and this child might be able to engage for 3 or 4 minutes and needs to move on, whereas other children might be able to do it for 15 minutes. Anything beyond 15-ish minutes for a 4-year-old, asking them to sit still and do what you want them to do is kind of an unrealistic expectation. So I think you just start circle by being active. Instead of asking them to sit still, which is unrealistic, a lot of people ask children to stand in line and be quiet, and that's completely unrealistic for most children. So I think part of it goes to goodness of fit is, are you trying to understand this child, or do you have expectations for how you want your activities to be with this child, and you want the child to conform? Because there's a disconnect there.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I mean, if the children can stand up, sit down, I've tried with some other programs where they have a hard time when they're reading stories to a group of children, and everybody wants to be very, very close to the book. What we've done is we just put everybody on their tummies. Everybody lays on their tummy, and that way your heads are all in a close little circle with everybody can see the book because they're all very close to it, and they can wiggle their feet all they want.
So the book is on the floor,
mm-hmm.
and the children gather around the book kind of in a circle, lying
on their tummies.
Yeah. Oh, very cool idea.
Yeah, maybe with their elbows on the floor and their chins resting on their hands. But what's nice is that they can wiggle their feet and it doesn't bother anybody. So they're moving, and they're close to the book, which is what they wanted. So what we were doing was just looking at, what do these children want? They want to be close to the book. How do we figure out how to get them all close to the book? And how do we let them wiggle without, somebody getting a foot in the face or something? Right. They don't mind if they're kicking each other's feet.
And you can often use your voice to invite children. A great teacher who I really respect, who's now a professor on the West Coast, did a video series that depicted how she would engage children in circle time, and she might start whispering, we have a very, very special song to do today, and I wonder if you can guess what that song is. So, or she would have something that she would be giving them a musical instrument, maybe an egg shaker, and she wouldn't say, if you come to circle, you get an egg shaker. She would just start handing the egg shakers out to the children who were already there, and naturally then the active and curious children would come immediately because they wanted to be involved. So invite children into circle time in ways that you might not have ever done it before. So you are excited. You're using your body language. You're using your voice. You might start acting out a song or a finger play without using any words, and the curious children will be right there with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the idea of giving them something to hold. If we go back to the active 4-year-old, maybe if he had something he could hold, or a little carpet square that he could sit on. The carpet square sort of just defines your space and gives you something to feel. If the carpet feels nice, he could rub it, but maybe he needs to hold, a little beanie baby or a little squishy ball so that he has something he can do. There's a lot of simple things you can try, and you just keep, experimenting until you find what works. So hopefully those are some good ideas for you. I was also going to mention, just as a suggestion for the slow to warm child, let's say you're taking the children to the library for story time. A slow to warm child might need you to talk about that a couple days ahead, giving them information about what will happen when you get there. How are you going to get there? We're going to all get in our car seats on the van, and then we're going to drive over to the library, and then there's going to be a place where we sit, and the nice librarian is going to read us a story. Other children that have a really, really difficult time, maybe even showing them pictures. This is what the place looks like that we're going to, and that way they're not so surprised, because sometimes they don't understand a lot of the words that we use. I will never forget this as long as I live, but when I was 5 years old and went to my kindergarten orientation, I remember I was so excited about going, and I remember the teacher walking us through the classroom and showing us the different areas, and she pointed to a door and she said, "This is the lavatory." Well, I was so excited. When I got back outside and my mother was there waiting for me, I was jumping up and down, so excited. I said, "Mom, you are not going to believe they have a laboratory in this classroom." Well, for those of you that maybe haven't ever heard the word, lavatory is a very fancy term for bathroom. And it has nothing to do with a laboratory where science experiments are conducted. So at the age of 5, that's what I heard, and that's what I thought was going to happen in that classroom when I got there. So I was a little disappointed. But even at my ripe old age, I still remember that clear as a bell. So it's interesting. So there's a lot of different ways that we can find little adaptations that work for all of the children in our program. All right, so now we do want to take you to the Early Childhood Mental Health Consortium website, and we're going to look at something called the Infant and Toddler Temperament Tool, which is also referred to as the IT3. Okay, and this, if you remember, this is what I said, is great for you to do, but it's also really great for parents to do with their children. So let's, this is the main page when you first log on to the website. And Karen, do they have the website? Or maybe they don't. Maybe we could type it into the comments and they could write it down, or
I can type it into the chat box in a moment.
Okay.
The Center for Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation is based in Georgetown in D.C., and they have a lot of wonderful resources on this website. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen, as well as what is scrolling, that they are focusing on a lot of mental health types of issues, and mental health in this case just means we're looking for ways to enhance social and emotional development and the well-being of children and all humans.
Right. Yeah, like I said, there's lots here that you can look at, and we could spend tons of time looking at all sorts of different things. So definitely write this down when Karen puts it into the chat box, and have it handy, bookmark it on your computer when you get a chance so that you can get to it easily. As you're glancing at this over on the right-hand side, it's got a little pane about what's new. And it's got some, if you look at the second item down, the competencies for early infant childhood mental health consultation. That's something interesting to look at. There's a section about stress and reducing stress for yourself and for children and families. And then, of course, the temperament tool. The toolkits that you see there right now are interesting. So as soon as Karen types, then we'll click on
going to go ahead and click first because this
Okay.
they changed the system here, and I have to figure out how to
how to send that to everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so we want to go on the left-hand side, where the green bar is. We want to go to Temperament tool. And then as you scroll down, you'll see there's a couple of handouts that you could print out for yourself. The first one is Introduction to Temperament, which is really a lot of the information that we've talked about so far today. There you see there's your 9 traits. You can click further on the temperament chart, and then it gives you the definition, and you see it's got the high activity, low activity, high distractibility, low distractibility, and it goes through all the 9 traits. So that's there for you to print and use. And then if you go down a little bit farther, you'll see this gray box at the bottom, and it says to use the IT3.
So we went back to where we first clicked on the temperament tool. So this is the main infant toddler temperament tool page.
Right, right. And so you can print these and do them by hand, but you see they've got 2 different versions of the infant and toddler temperament tool. They've got it for infants birth up to 18 months, and they also have one for toddlers 18 months to 36 months. Now, I have had people say, you know, like the woman that or person we were talking to online here about a 4-year-old. And if you really need some strategies and some help, I don't see any reason why you couldn't do the toddler version on a 4-year-old. At least it's going to give you some information. It might not be the perfect information that you're looking for, but it certainly can't hurt. So that's my recommendation to people. I will also point out, if you look at the very last line here, you can print these in Spanish, and that's exciting too. So if you have parents that want to complete it in Spanish, there you go, they can do it. Karen, let's look at the toddler IT3. So this is what you see when you click on completing this. So at the top, it says, I'm completing this IT3 for myself, and you can type in a child's name if you want to. Karen's choosing a name. It's Bobby. And you click Next. There you go. So now what you're going to do for all 9 of those traits that we talked about, we're going to click what temperament, or where I fall myself as a provider, and where Bobby is. So let's say that let's say I am, you see that's the first column there, I am less active. So we'd click that bubble, and Bobby is highly active.
And again, this is the online version, which is very easy to use, and will actually print a summary of this for you.
Wait till you see it.
Yeah, but if you print this tool, you would be doing this by paper, and then there would be a series of options or strategies for you depending on which of these traits you chose for yourself as well as for the child.
Right, and that's what I love, is that you could do this for every child in your classroom or your program, because it takes literally 5 minutes or less to do this for each child. And then you've got an individual list of strategies for these children. That's what I think is really awesome. All right, so hold on, Karen and I are multitasking here with our screens and mouses. So we'll finish our chart in just a second.
So right now I'm sending under what's the chat category. It might come up under your questions box. I'm not sure, depending on which device you're using. Sending to you the link, the URL link, www.ecmhc.org, and then the title of that is Center for Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation, and what you're looking for is the Natural Temperament Tool, also called the IT3. So hopefully you have that information now available to you, and you can either take a screenshot or write it down so you can find this if you're interested later.
Good. Okay, so distractibility. I'm more focused, and Bobby is yeah, and Bobby is easily distracted. We're just going to click these really fast. Um, and I'm a relaxed personality.
So the intensity is like your emotional response to something. So Helen is relaxed.
And let's say Bobby is intense. So when something happens, he lets us know.
He responds intensely,
That's right.
strongly.
I'm a very regular person. I like things to happen at the same time every day. I don't like when my morning routine gets messed up or it kind of sets off my whole day. But Bobby is a more spontaneous child. He's like the active one we talked about. You just never know. Let's just say, for the sake of making things interesting, I'm highly sensitive and Bobby is highly sensitive. And approachability, I would say we're both highly approachable, very outgoing, adapt well in new situations, so that's adaptability. We're both highly adaptable, both myself and Bobby. I am less persistent, we'll say, and Bobby is highly persistent. He'll stick with something forever, and it's hard to get him to change activities when I want him to. And I am generally in a positive mood, and Bobby is more serious, we'll say. Okay, so you see how quickly you just click, click, click through there, chart yourself, chart the child. And then the gray box at the bottom where it says get your results. Once you click that, here you go. Here is your individualized plan for yourself and for Bobby to promote that goodness of fit that we talked about. You see on the first one, activity level. Bobby's highly active. You are less active. So it says, you and Bobby seem to differ in regards to activity level. Here's some ideas to help you. Allow additional time for outdoor activities so that Bobby can really use his energy. Provide many indoor opportunities for Bobby's gross motor or large muscle skills, such as an obstacle course with pillows and cushions or time to dance to music. You know, we talked about, you know, having things to hold or manipulate, balls to roll, trucks to push. You know, those are all active things that would probably be helpful for him. Provide hands-on play that Bobby can get into. Play-Doh is wonderful for active children. It really, you know, you'll see a lot of focus with that because there's a lot of sensory stuff going on. Just a little bit of sudsy water and some plastic cups, that'll keep him busy forever. Engaging Bobby in everyday activities. Letting him help around the classroom. He can carry the spoons to the table. He can throw his trash away. He can help other people throw their trash away. He can carry the laundry, or he can drag the laundry basket down to the laundry room for you if he wakes up early from naps. See, there's a lot of things that you can do. You can use Bobby's energy level as an example to the other children. You're jumping up and down to the music. Jason and Lee, would you like to do it too? So then maybe those are your slow to warm children that, you know, maybe you're just watching, but you could show them that it's okay to be active and have high energy, and ask them if they want to join in. Of course, you want to child-proof your home or child care setting so that, you know, Bobby can explore without having any troubles. And giving him advanced warning for everything that you're going to do, not just nap time as it says here. But it might take him 30 to 60 minutes to wind down from an activity before he's ready to eat or to sleep. And that seems like an excessive amount of time, but that might be, you know, maybe you just don't do anything really active for that 45 minutes before nap time. I think that's a good idea. So I think you see how helpful this can be. I don't think you really need me to read all of these to you. What do you think? Do you all think this would be helpful for you with your children?
We have a lot of people saying yes, this is very helpful.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I share it with so many people, and I love things that are simple and helpful, and this is both. So please write it down. Please use it. And you see what I mean about parents. Don't you think this would, parents are the ones that, well, not always, but, they're the ones that aren't really sure what strategies to use when that child is having a meltdown and they've got to get to work. And they throw them in the car and buckle them in and drop them off with you, and everybody's cranky and mad by the time they get there, and it's a terrible way to start your day. So if a parent had some of these strategies, perhaps they could do things a little bit differently, and everybody's day would start out nice.
And this was actually written for parents, so
Yeah.
you'll find the language in the snapshot of Goodness of Fit and the recommendations to be designed for parents. And if you complete this in Spanish, obviously your recommendations and your snapshot will be written in Spanish. So that's a very helpful tool for at least those two languages. English and
Right,
Spanish.
right. Well, I know we have a lot of other languages here, but at least now we've got Spanish on our radar. All right, so quick and easy, good information. Please use it. Please try it. I guarantee you will find it helpful. All right. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. We've got just a short amount of time left. Maybe we'll have time for questions.
So someone's asking what the website is. Can you see the chat box where I typed in the website? Hopefully that was sent, that everybody was able to receive that. Okay, some people are letting me know yes. So the website for early childhood mental health, the Center for Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation is www.e as in Edward, C as in cat, M as in Mary, H as in hat, C as in cat, .org, O-R-G, www.ecmhc.org.
All right, good. All right, so after all this talk about the 3 styles, the 9 temperament traits, what do you think? Why is understanding natural temperament important? What would you think?
Someone just let me know. Thank you, Jessica. That it GoToWebinar is now calling an announcement box. That's new information. They keep changing and updating things, so it might not say chat. It might say an announcement box. Very cool. Okay, so back to the question. Why is understanding natural temperament styles important?
Right. Taking better care of the children, getting to know the children, how to work with each child.
How to understand the child and the uniqueness of each child.
Right. It's so important. It's just if we could just all, what's interesting too is when I've taught this class in different ways over the years, you can use this too. Let's say you have a coworker that maybe you just don't always seem to work well together. If you go through and chart yourself and chart your coworker on those 9 traits, it's like a light bulb going off. Maybe it's your teenage child that, you're like, I just don't understand this teenage child. Or maybe it's your spouse or significant other. It could be that too. It's a really nice way just to sort of get you to stop and sit back and think and reflect about what can I do differently? How can I relate to this person a little bit differently that might be more effective and therefore make us more productive? Because children aren't going to thrive and do well if they're not in a place that understands them and gives them a chance to be their unique self.
A couple more comments. Someone's indicating that it helps us to understand the child when we as adults, we realize that children don't understand themselves in the way that we can understand ourselves a little bit as we get older. So it helps us to help them enjoy learning and help them to be successful. And it also makes it easier for us to look at a situation differently when it arises, rather than trying, like you said earlier, trying to force a child to change. We're sensitive and we're understanding, and we say this child has a hard time with a routine being the same every day. This child isn't hungry yet. So what do I need to understand about that child to help the child be successful in this environment?
Right. So we all agree then, I think it's very important. It makes our jobs easier, and it makes the children happy, parents happy, and that makes everything better. So infants and toddlers, just like adults, are unique individuals, and they have unique temperaments, and they have unique needs and desires. So we look at the individual person and we find a way to work best with them or interact best with them. What's helpful for an infant may change daily, and even sometimes within the same day. You know, they might start off with a great morning, and then something happens, or they get woken up early from their nap, and the rest of the afternoon is pretty rough. So it changes constantly, and you have to be reevaluating throughout the day. And what works for one infant and toddler is probably not going to work for all of your infants and toddlers. So there's your different set of rules for every child. You need to be flexible. You need to be creative, and it goes a long way in helping to understand the differences in children's temperament. And the goal is to better understand and then effectively support a child's temperament. But remember, we're not trying to change it. You know, if you have a child that, you know, has a very low persistence, and, you know, you as an adult feel like it's important for them to learn to focus on things, which is true. You know, we do want to have a good amount of focus. So you offer little challenges, little bits at a time, and give them practice at building up their persistence or their focus, but not in such a way that it's overwhelming or frustrating to the child. So hopefully that is a helpful strategy. And just please always remember that temperaments make each child and each caregiver unique. Everybody's special, everybody's remarkable, and it can be a really nice thing to be able to understand what the children need and see them thrive and grow. So let's look again at the goodness of fit. There are plenty of things that we may not think about, but that we need to be aware of as we nurture and care for young children. Let's look at a few of those. First off, we want to avoid making comparisons or labeling children. We do have a lot of experience, and we may, you know, have sort of a gut feeling about certain things, but we need to leave that up to professionals to make any sort of diagnoses for children. So even though it might be tempting sometimes to say to a child, why can't you be more like so-and-so? It's hurtful. No matter how young the child, they understand that you're not pleased with me as a person and you wish I could be more like another person. So resist saying things like that. It's best to avoid these thoughts, and it's essential to avoid making comments like that. Avoid statements like, I wish you were more outgoing, or I wish you were more sensitive. Comparative statements are not helpful either, and they can make a child feel inadequate. So instead of making a comment, use words that state what you see and what you hear. So for example, it seems that you're not ready to play with that group of children just yet. Instead of saying, you're really very shy today, that's labeling children. So you're just, you know, again, another thing maybe to highlight and remember, state what you see and what you hear. Sort of like just the facts, ma'am. All right? Slow down your day and create some flexibility in your schedule. We do get really busy multitasking, trying to get as much done as possible. And we rush from one activity to the next, and we forget to slow down and pay attention to the needs of each person in our program. I remind people all the time, I'm like, what's the rush? You've got all day. That's sort of my catchphrase. And once I say that to people, they're like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. You know, who says we have to have all the diapers changed in 10 minutes? You know, we could do some now. We could do some later. So give yourself permission, and the people that you work with, give each other permission to slow down and relax. And if, you know, if you're 5-10 minutes late getting from one activity to the next, or maybe you don't do that art activity today because it just didn't seem like it was going to work out. The children were more interested in playing outside on this beautiful sunny day. I spent 30 minutes outside with a class yesterday searching the entire playground for ant hills and ants. There were other things we were going to do, but that was what they were really, really interested in, so that's what we did, and it was actually really fun. So have that flexibility and look at the children and see what it is they want to do. Keep in mind that children who are slow to warm or those who are new to a program, they might need additional time to settle into your routine. So they might be used to going down for a nap earlier or having lunch earlier. So think about ways you can transition them. Empathize with young children and think about how vulnerable it feels to be a child, dependent on someone else for their food, for their shelter, for their clothing, a safe place to sleep, and with no reassurance, and they really have very little control over what happens. They don't really get to make the decisions. We tend to make all the decisions for them. So see life from a child's perspective. And think about how they must feel, and see if you can't find times when they can make choices about things that they do. Understanding a child's natural temperament will help you be more empathetic and compassionate with all the children that you come across. Focus on the positive. Be that person with the positive silver lining attitude. It may seem easier to focus on the challenges and difficulties of a child's temperament, especially if it doesn't really match your own. However, if you recognize the uniqueness and positive attributes of all the children, it's going to seem a lot easier. So for every characteristic that you might label as challenging or difficult, there's always a way to sort of flip it around to a positive. So for example, if you have a slow to warm child, they are less likely to be influenced by peer pressure as they get older. Highly active children are often very good at sports and do well in demanding jobs as adults. And serious children, when they grow up, they tend to be very analytical and be very good evaluators. So that's what we're looking at, is the end result of what these children will be as they grow up and find their purpose in life. All right, so I think this is our final slide, just sort of summarizing that understanding natural temperaments and that goodness of fit are extremely important as we create positive social and emotional experiences for the young children in our care. I think we have just a few more minutes. If anybody has questions or anything else that they would like me to go over again, you can type those in. Maybe not.
We don't have any comments or questions.
I must have done a good job.
I think this topic is extremely important, and it's very enlightening when we really realize that we only see life through our perspective, and by taking this moment to stop and look, like you said, empathize with the children, really understand how they might view life very differently than we do, it's very helpful for us. I want to comment, there were a couple questions related to the certificates, and if you did join us within the first few minutes of today's webinar and stayed until the end, we will be sending a certificate by email for, it will be 2.5 hours, even though we're probably going to end here a little bit early.
So an hour and a half.
I mean, an hour and a half, sorry.
Right.
I'm looking at the number 2 on the screen. Sorry. Thank you for catching that, Helen.
Yes.
An hour and a half, 90 minutes. We also have some people who are entering names and email addresses of people who have been participating in the webinar with them. So if someone is watching with you, then go ahead and in the question or comment box type in that person's name and email address, and we will be able to send a certificate to that person as well. Someone asked if joining at 7 minutes after 1, we do cut it off at 10 minutes. So if you joined at 1:07, we do consider that as still being eligible for a certificate. One thing I am curious about is we don't do very many afternoon webinars, and I'm wondering if this was something that was helpful to you at this time of day, if it should be an hour and a half, if it should be only an hour. If you could type in any comments, feedback for us related to doing webinars at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a weekday. That would be helpful for us. We do realize that you are, many of you, most of you are involved in working with children right now. So we typically offer these at night, but if this is something that's helpful at this time, please let us know. If it's too long and it should only be an hour based on the time you have available, let us know that as well. We really appreciate your participation today, all of your good comments, questions, and the feedback that you're providing for us. Anything else you'd like to say, Helen?
Oh, gosh, I can't think of anything. And we did seem like we have a very active group, a lot of comments, and that's very helpful to us. You know, as we're sitting here looking at a screen, we can't see your faces, so we can sort of tailor our conversation based on the comments you make. So thank you very much.
Someone did ask about handouts for this. We did not make this presentation available as a handout, but if you do go to the Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation website, you can find a lot of handouts there that will help you understand the temperament styles, temperament traits, as well as goodness of fit. So thank you all for joining us today. We will sign off now, and we look forward to having you join us again for another webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.